And maybe if you put that much of a time lag in it, it makes more sense, hopefully. I don't know. Okay, so next segment right here is, well, we have to get straight away to the Ontario government legislation effort regarding the availability of cannabis to anybody that wants to use it. And the news is that it's not very good. Not very good at all. Here it is, Ontario to create cannabis control board. Focus on the word control. And it's opening up 60 storefronts, ladies and gentlemen. Have you seen how large Ontario is, by the way? Or maybe the folks going to fix themselves getting off the opioids live close to one already. The Ontario government will announce, and did announce on Friday, that it will create a cannabis control board. But that's not exactly what they announced. We'll get into that. And they're going to open up 60 storefronts to manage the sale and distribution of marijuana in the province. Restricting the marijuana sales to those 19 and older, although if you need to get into the Army, I'm sure they can make an exception by a year, and a year above the minimum age recommended by the federal government's Cannabis Task Force. I don't know if that's the deal, but you know, they tell you certain things you could do at an age. Like, why would you be able to drive around in a car at 16 if you can't even, takes you 3 years later to sort out rolling a cigarette? The 30 to 60 stores selling marijuana will not be housed inside the existing LCBO stores, et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically the blurb from those guys. And some folks are saying that the reason they're coming up with this right now is that Kathleen Wynne, I hate to say it, but she's the premier of the province, is in some trouble with a bit of a scandal that she's being called to testify in soon. And a lot of people are going to care a lot less about that than this whole cannabis thing. And so, you know, it's all bread and circuses again. But, you know, where has there never been a scandal with a politician before? That is most likely the case. It says here, accusing the Liberals of using the marijuana legislation as a smokescreen for scandals. Neither the Progressive Conservatives or New Democrat Party yet say how they would distribute cannabis next year, but they're not poised to. They're not poised to. So that's the trusted press again coming at us at the CBC. And let's see about bringing that gal up again. I want to see if I can talk to that one. There were a couple of points she was making that I thought we should all hear. This particular interviewee on the CBC. Let's see if we can get this coming in here. And they are speaking with the interviewer, Rosie Barton. I'll give you their names later. Here we go.
For sensible drug policy in Toronto is Nazli Megzoudi. She is of the International Centre for Science in Drug Policy. Good to see you both, ladies. Nazli, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of the framework that Ontario announced in terms of distribution and sale of marijuana? Is it the right approach?
Yeah, I think there are actually a number of really positive announcements that were made today.
That's not where you start. That's not where you start, Miss, because Nazli, because that's not what was going on. What was going on was that there were a lot of bad things happening. There were far more bad things happening than good things happening. So focus on the main thing, but do go on. This is funny.
First being the age of access at 19. It was really important, I think, to align the age of access for cannabis with alcohol. Given that alcohol use at a young age is not safer than cannabis, we certainly wouldn't want to be incentivizing alcohol use.
This isn't about incentivizing alcohol use. This is just about cannabis. And here comes the beginning of the barrage of the false comparisons of similarity between two completely different substances in both their effect and results. But go on.
Over cannabis by having a higher age restriction for cannabis. So that was one positive element that we saw today. I think another really positive element was the fact that the storefronts will not be selling cannabis and alcohol together.
Oh, good. And they also won't be selling power saws and fishing rods together because they're also not related. This is not these people just skip right over. This woman is from some kind of access shame restriction facility.
We certainly don't want to be encouraging poly-drug use, so the use of those two substances together. So definitely creating separate storefronts for cannabis also creates opportunities for things such as cannabis education as well.
What does that mean? Cannabis education. You can see that fastball coming down. This is indoctrination. If this is coming from a government that doesn't want to allow us to have it anyway.
Which would be less likely or less easy to do within the context of existing LCBOs. So certainly some positive developments from Ontario's announcement today.
Okay.
That's her whole take right off the top. That's her whole take right off the top of what everybody else, including the staunch to the right Globe and Mail, the National Post, in both the editorial policies of the paper and several of the columnists inside, have completely picked apart this ridiculous scheme to limit something that belongs to us. And do we consider statistics such as California marijuana decriminalization, which is completely different from legalization, drops youth crime rate to record lows, says a study in the Huffington Post 2012. A drastic 20% decrease in juvenile crime, bringing the underage crime rate to the lowest level since the state started keeping records in 1954. And this is the general term of things. This is, in fact, the way it's going in so many of the jurisdictions, and this is why it's taking longer to roll out legalization. Because what are we going to do about the lack of work and actual things to do in the meantime if this thing really becomes legal? So, of course, they don't want that. And so that's what it was on the evening of the Thursday, Shifty, last week. They delivered the deliberately too late notice that there would be a massive and misguided further announcement the very next morning to usher in a paradigm shift from how we bust you now with cannabis over to how we're going to bust you later over cannabis. We control, you the majority. I'll bet the more discerning of you listening today are able to pick up from my tone that no, I don't endorse this any more than does the province of British Columbia, for example, who have an infinitely superior model from transitioning into providing willing customers and patients with a plant that can grow in the ground. And so many other jurisdictions that have been having a much better time of things than we are, clumsily being put forward into time that's going to cause an unbelievable series of lawsuits, and there'll be all kinds of wrangling as they try to untangle the messes that will come from this ridiculous disaster that these folks have put together. Now, I'm going to spend a bit of time now on the conference itself as soon as the tab comes up that I am looking for now. Live show. Okay, I thought I had everything pinned down here, but let's get that out of the way. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So these are the three Stooges, folks. Now, I'm going to do some of it now and some of it next episode because it's too much to cover and too much to ignore. So rather than trying to get it all in, let's hear what... this is the tiny minister. I'm going to call this guy the punk in the middle. I don't really feel like I want to get into the names right now. There are three gentlemen up there wearing the suits and the tie. By the way, I'm telling the truth. Here's the tie. Where's this? Is the camera showing the tie? Is it this one? Okay. Tie. So I'm on board with the truth, right? That's the menu. And so here's the little guy. He comes trotting out and says, "Oh, thanks for everybody coming here. Nice to see you." And then he has this to say.
The Federal Cannabis Act proposes rules and restrictions around production, sale, possession, and consumption of cannabis that will apply across the country.
That sounds like freedom, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound awesome? This little guy, he's... Here's how we're going to run and own and operate every single aspect of your chosen particular medicine, and we'll get to why recreational is also medicine right now. It's also medicine because if you take in a certain amount and enough of it, and properly as a food, not just smoking it, you kind of don't wind up needing a lot of medicine. It's a nutrient. It's a nutrient, folks. Like it's like kale. Okay, so there's a lot of cool stuff in there besides the part that gets you high, and it's meant to be ingested as a plant. And this is part of the greater problem, not just the focusing on letting everyone smoke a joint or a bong once in a while. But let's listen to this guy here again. He's got more to say.
But it also leaves the provinces and territories with some big decisions to make.
Why? Why don't you just accept the fact that most people either want to do it or don't want people to get busted for doing it? Why don't you sit down and just chill out a little bit instead of, being a servile parasite? No? You want to be a servile parasite? No, okay. Continue.
If passed, the federal bill will set into motion a once-in-a-generation change.
That's the problem. That's the problem right there, that everybody, well, it's good that they're doing something at least. No, it's not. You don't build a shitty foundation for your house or none whatsoever and then start wondering about 3 years down the road, oh, maybe we should renovate the basement, and then because the ceiling is collapsing because you didn't plan it out in the first place and you threw away the logic and the reason and the functionality of so many other successful models in the first place. Why the politicians against green everywhere? They have to make up this bullshit. They're constructing a paradigm for discussion that limits the possibilities of what really can happen. And that is a particular trick of governing. I've looked it up. I found it. It's an old one, so we'll get to that later. But let's let this little fella continue. He's so awkward.
For our society, the end of prohibition. Legalization of cannabis is a broad and complex topic.
Only because you're factoring in policing and incarceration and punishment and control out of the gate instead of addressing the true issue that's driving this matter, which is that we have the freedom and right to do this if we want.
That we know is accompanied by some concerns for Ontario families.
Some concerns for Ontario families. So this will be the group of people who are primarily, they've got a hunch. Man, I've been dealing with people like this over the past year, getting this show ready. People that have a hunch or a notion and no data and are of the type who consistently misinterpret the stated end point. And they twist it to their own agenda. And in this particular case of the cannabis that I'm talking about, it's the government telling you what to do. Is nothing more than that. And you go, well, they're letting us do this. And it's a trick through misinterpretation.
Such a considerable change has rightly led to some anxieties about the impact of legalization on our communities, our roads, and our children's health.
And I'll tell you where a lot of those anxieties are coming from. They're coming from the policing establishment of the nation. Because if you had a genuinely freed up cannabis access, the right of the people, same as the folks sitting in the bar having a drink right now, if you were able to just let us do that, there would be far less for the police to do. Far fewer people to arrest. So, when they're talking about the roads and the use, they need to go right to, well, what about the police? What do they think?
The people of Ontario rightfully expect their government to approach legalization thoughtfully and responsibly.
Well, that's a true statement. We do expect you to approach it that way. It's too bad you haven't. With this nonsense, continue.
Which is why we have set out 4 key priorities for Ontario's approach to the federal plan.
4 priorities. Here we go.
Our aim from the start has been to protect youth, promote health and road safety, focus on prevention and harm reduction, and eliminate the illegal market.
So eliminate the illegal market by calling the people who've already figured out how to do it criminals and then taking it over themselves to become the Tony Soprano, and the legislature is the bada bing. and there's only 60 outlets for tons of people that probably close at 6 o'clock on Sundays. Really well thought out, guys. The product of a sober mind, this legislation. Good for you. Continue.
Even though the federal bill was only introduced a few months ago, our government has been working on these priorities for over a year now.
That just sounds like such a sucky thing to say. Oh, we've been working on this for a long time, particularly when if this is what you've been working on for a long time. Personally, if I were you, fella, I'd be saying, yeah, when the announcement came earlier this year, we started throwing things together and it's kind of fucked up right now. We're doing the best we can, but, we're government people. And then you could go, well, at least this guy's telling the truth. But what he's saying here is they're extruding from their political orifice a bill so feces-like that I can't believe anybody spent a year on anything to come up with all of this. We have so many holes in this sieve. Here we go.
Guided by a dedicated legalization of cannabis secretariat, we have been working closely with our federal and provincial counterparts.
Who else? Who else have you been working with? Your federal counterparts of attorney generals and your provincial counterparts? Who else have you been considering when you're going to try to legalize in some way cannabis? Who else have you been consulting?
Consulting with public health experts.
Oh, okay. Public health experts who are connected to institutions that recommend against the use of cannabis, such as CAMH. Who else? Who else have you been consulting regarding the access to cannabis? Who?
Law enforcement.
Oh, right. Law enforcement. Okay. They're the next person on the list that needs to take in the news. Okay. So who else are you considering while you're dreaming up these crazy rules? Who else are you running it by?
Community agencies and municipalities from across the province.
Agencies and municipalities. Agencies and municipalities. That's who you're sharing it with. Okay, there must be one more group of people that you're going to discuss the access to cannabis situation with. There's got to be one more group of people. Come on, it's got to be saving the best for last. That's it. What? Who? When?
And learning from the lessons of the 8 U.S. states who have already legalized.
That's who you're consulting? States that have already legalized, and your model contains hardly any of the models that were shown to be working in a superior manner. There must be somebody else you've asked.
By bringing these different perspectives together.
Oh, no, you didn't ask anybody else. Those are the sole perspectives you brought together. Where the fuck are the users, stupid? Where are the people who have been using this being consulted? Where is the consultation from the medical people? Where is the consultation from the recreational people that want to use this stuff that you're like some kind of pesky nanny walking around telling us we can't have those? You've got some kind of a power complex, Sonny, and it doesn't show up on the outside. You're not walking around in truth. You've got to go to this link on YouTube, Ontario announcement of its regulation of marijuana in Ontario. They're still saying the word marijuana in the friggin' YouTube video. Now, I don't know who posted it, but it is the press conference. These folks and the perception of what this is and what it does, we're back into full of shitsville. Go on, chump.
We have developed a plan to ensure a safe and sensible framework as the federal government moves to legalize.
When a government agent says the word, we are going to do something sensibly, flip through your history books and tell me when that's ever happened. It hardly ever happens. This act itself is so full of holes. It's so full of shit. We don't have time. Well, I could do a 10-hour show on this. And if you put together everything that everybody's saying, it's unbelievable that these idiots spent a year trying to put something together that's basically a yoke around our necks and a denial of the facts. Listen to this.
Every decision that we are announcing today, and every one that we still have to make, was guided by those two key principles. And with that in mind, in order to be ready for next July, our government will bring forward legislation this fall to ensure that even after legalization, cannabis remains a carefully controlled substance in Ontario.
It sounds like such a fun time. Where do you drink? Where do you sit back and knock back your G&Ts when you're dreaming up this poppycock, Sonny? Which Bay Street club do you sit around in? Is it the York Club, or what's the name of the thing? Is it the Toronto Club? Like, who comes up with this half-baked bullshit? While you sit around and drink whatever you want, coming up with this nonsense. Go on.
The key points of our approach fall into two broad categories.
Fairness and decency won't be among them. Go ahead.
Lawful use, that's the who, what, and where can cannabis be used.
Uh-huh.
And retail, the how and where cannabis could be sold.
In other words, what you're saying is how you're going to control it and call a bunch of people who were already running an industry a bunch of criminals, and then taking that industry over yourself to be the criminal, and then understanding how you're going to be the one profiting from all of that sale after years and years of pain endured and arrests and getting fucked over with the family because somebody got arrested and gone to jail and ruined lives. And now all of that, you've actually still got people in jail right now from suffering from these things. And all of a sudden, you're going to profit from it? You? You don't know what you're doing. You don't understand the same basic principles that these kinds of manipulations throughout history have done. Okay, this is like a horror universe you've got going here. So maybe we should think about that before we decide what to do with these people. Folks, what I'm trying to get you to understand is that these folks are lying and manipulating in us. I'm trying to get an awareness in people together where you go, hey, this is all bullshit from this proposal coming through, and we've got to be able to do something about it. So here we go.
Let's start with the who.
Oh, he wants to start with the who. Okay, well, look, who apparently were the cops, right? That's basically what that was. But I'd rather listen to this one if that's okay. Let's start with the who.
Number 9.
Oh, that's the Beatles. Okay, that's not going to work. All right, so listen, we'll get back to this guy later, but...
We will be proposing that 19 be the minimum age
Yeah, you're
for
proposing
anyone to
that.
buy, consume, or have cannabis in Ontario.
That's the proposal. This whole thing, okay, is a proposal. That's what I want to remind everybody, that this is not an edict. This is not a law. This is not the way it's going to be, because when you have a proposal, it means something. It means that you are presenting an idea and putting it forward in the hopes that the recipient will say yes. And we are saying no, my little friend. We're saying no to all of this. This newest, latest, freshest, shameful announcement to the public from Kathleen Wynne, the Premier, detailing in great measure what a corrupt, greedy asshole she is matched only by the sharp-suited scumbags pushing the big dollar agenda of control, sending the wrong messages about a healthful plant in a series of contrived policy levers. Remember, we were talking about policy levers before. Policy levers, oh yeah, that's a thing. That's definitely a thing. Why is a policy lever a problem for me? Well, basically, you're just using force and manipulation to achieve a desired outcome, and nothing could be further from democracy, which is the alleged model that these people who are keeping this substance away from us are running on. Does that make sense? You got that one? Some people argue it, but was that clear? I think so. I hope so anyway. So I'm going to try to get the right kind of sound for this, because yeah, I'm gonna kind of have to do that. Here we go. These creeps are creeping me out. So here we go. Let's talk about Kathleen Wynne's machinations And let's bring up this particular article here that ties in with all of this and kind of explains it, what I just said there in a bit of a freak out. Oh, it's subtle. All of a sudden can't open it up we don't have a internet connection. Is that right? The internet's been shut down. Oh, is that the deal? Okay. So we don't have an internet now. There's no internet connection. Oh, boy, I guess I gotta fucking wing it. All right. Okay, all right. Fine and dandy. That's what we'll do. I'll just tell you exactly what I'm talking about with some stuff that isn't dependent on the internet. First of all, they are not legalizing it, okay? Understand that. They are not legalizing. Legalizing is a word that they are using to control the tone, to cast the spell, to affect your perception with a premeditated policy lever. I know. It sounds so democratic. Just like when the word marijuana was devised to stigmatize it or calling it the devil weed. These are the same old tricks, like back from the initial days of cannabis prohibition, packaged up in a flashy new box, which is as big a compliment as could be pulled out of me regarding Kathleen Wynne. They are wickedly designing a series of legal leg-hold traps that will eventually cause so many legal problems and put far too many people in prison under the new penal code involving cannabis compared to the old one. We all know the cops were never going to be okay with the reality of a genuinely decriminalized substance. They would have far less to do, fewer people to bust and process, a modern-day realization that some policing is societally redundant and exists only for its own purpose, propagated merely to bring profit to the corporation that each police service is. After honestly decriminalizing the good green, the police budget would not only not need an annual increase, they could never justify keeping their current roster on duty. Some of them would have to be laid off. The Police Chief Society never want that, and neither would the police union, and they are a minority. So how come they get to do that? It's that policymakers have been pulling levers and bending science, ignoring the bounty of evidence to the opposite of their diktat, and shoving their harsh, scolding, disregarding bullshit down the throats of the majority with an absolutely regressive and repressive flexing of aggressive force. And I want to sue them. And so should you, based on ignoring copious evidence and choosing to set harsh policy against the sensibility of the evidence. They're spewing toxins into the water. They're participating in profiting from major environmental international mayhem. I'm all done following the lead of these same people, doing the same things over and over, and then telling people like myself and everyone else and my guest on the show who's fresh into the studio that we're terrible people and that this activity should be discouraged. Again, folks that don't use this stuff are telling us how it's going to go. And you have to look at their official point of view and look around the world and see how messed up it is and say, I'm done with this bullshit. And because these same instincts guided me well away from and beyond a guaranteed funeral 3 years back, I'm going to collect on that guarantee that fell through by allowing myself to just keep on using those same survival senses. And these intuitions and awarenesses, they will be my personal GPS, not the government's proposal. Proposal failed. Like the girl who doesn't want to go out with that particular dork to the high school prom. Sure, he proposed to her. Please come with me. I'll bring you a corsage or whatever the fuck they do at this age. But she turned him down, and we as the electorate and as the partakers thereof and the folks with the rights will not be dictated to by the likes of these idiots. We're going to do a video piece on these guys, okay? They were so funny. It was all kinds of fun.